In this video, we're going to talk more about mockups. If you haven't seen any of my other videos about product mockups for your print-on-demand shop, I will link to them in the description. In this video, we're going to focus on a couple of things. One is an important, relatively new feature to both Printify and Printful mockups, and then we'll also talk about backgrounds for your mockups. All right, so hopefully the reason why I'm combining these two topics into a video will become clear in a moment. First, let's talk about the feature that's a recent addition in both Printify and Printful. I think it's newer in Printify. It's been there for a little bit in Printful. And specifically, what I'm talking about is the ability to preview your design mockup in the CMYK color profile. Now, for a long time on these platforms, you would just upload your design in the sRGB or RGB color space because that's what they recommended that you save your print files as, and then your mockups would also display the colors in that same color profile. But then in real life, they actually get converted to CMYK when they're printed on your products. And sometimes, especially if you have really bright, vibrant colors in your designs, that can look a little bit different when it's converted to CMYK. But there's not really been an easy way for you to show what it will actually look like in your mockups until now, because as I mentioned, both Printify and Printful now let you view your mockup with your design converted into that CMYK color profile. It is super easy for both of them. We'll look at Printify first because I already have a design open here. I'm going to disappear for a second so I can show you the menu on the right side of the screen. What you're looking for here, once you're in the preview view, so this is not the edit view of the design editor, this is the preview view where you can see your various mockups. There's now a section here where it says mockup color mode, and currently, it is in the bright or colorful RGB mode, and if we change this to realistic, so there we go. It may not be immediately obvious what the difference was, but you can toggle back and forth between them to see the difference. And in this case, you can see both the blue and the reds are a little bit more dull and subdued in the realistic or CMYK profile. So if we leave this selected as realistic here, then when we publish this to our store, these mockups are going to come through looking like this, which is more realistic. So this is a great option that I'm really happy to see that Printify has now, because now with this option, you can also view them in CMYK and then download them to still add your own backgrounds, but they'll have a more accurate color profile in your mockups. And I do still recommend doing that. That is the second topic we're going to touch on in this video, and we'll come back to Printify to talk about something in just a second. But first, let me just point out how you do this in Printful. So this is your design editing view part of the workflow when you select a product and then you upload your print file, or you select your print file to place on it. Again, this is going to be towards the right side of the screen. So what we've got here is the little placements menu, but underneath that little menu, you've got this little kind of looks like an ink drop, and when you click on that, it gives you this little pop-up that says what your print will look like. And if you toggle this switch that says show adjusted mockup, you will see the colors change. And let me actually, if I zoom in on it, it'll be even more obvious. There you go. So as you can see, this design has a lot of vibrant colors in it. And if we toggle that on, it's going to make them look a little bit more dull, which will be a better, more accurate representation of how that will get printed. And if you enable that, it will carry through to the mockups that you create on Printful as well. So that's that feature I wanted to show you on both Printify and Printful. Super easy, you just need to know where to look to find it. But this opens the door to a conversation about mockup backgrounds, because if you want to do this, you really have two choices as far as what to do about your mockups in general now. Because remember, we still uploaded our print file in the RGB or sRGB color profile to our platform because they still recommend that. They still recommend in their help articles, I'll link to them in the description in case you want confirmation, both Printify and Printful still recommend you upload your print files in the RGB color space because their platforms are built to handle that. They're expecting to convert from RGB to CMYK. That of course means your print file will be in RGB, even though you'll have mockups that are more representative of CMYK. And that can kind of complicate things from a mockup standpoint, especially if you add your own backgrounds to the mockups that your platform provides, or if you create mockups somewhere else like Placeit. Because previously what you would probably be doing is taking your print file, like the one you actually used, just uploading it to a service like Placeit and then creating your mockups. And those mockups are going to show your image in the RGB color profile because that's what your print file is. I hope that made sense. Basically, if you're using only your own mockups and that's what you're going to keep doing, you're only going to use Placeit or whatever mockups you're creating, you can just keep doing what you've been doing. That's not a problem. But if you want to use at least some of the mockups mockups that Printify or Printful provides, and you want to start using this new feature, that's where you have to pay attention to the color profile in the mockups that you are creating separately, because you want them to match. So in order to get them to match, basically you just need to have a separate print file that's also in the CMYK color profile that you can use with Placeit or whatever method you're using to create your own mockups, because that will more closely match any mockups you're taking from Printify or Printful and using in your listing. And if that sounds like too much, then you kind of have a decision to make. Either use only your own mockups and none of these, or use only these mockups and none of your own, because either way, then that would save you from having to, save 2 print files. And that brings us to the real second topic of this video, which is mockup backgrounds. Because if your decision is to simplify things and not do separately created mockups and use the ones that your platform creates, because now you can display them in the correct color profile, we still need to talk about those backgrounds, because a lot of the mockups available both on Printful and Printify are these plain white background mockups, which just don't really do anything to make your shop look professional or differentiate your shop from the countless other shops that just use a plain white background. They have gotten a little better in the last maybe year or so. As you can see on Printify, there's a couple that look more like this, where there's some context, is not just a plain white background, but the majority are still a plain white background. So let's talk a little bit about those backgrounds. There really isn't a wrong way to make your backgrounds or to add your backgrounds. There's really just whatever way is most efficient for you, because doing this every time can certainly, take a bit of your time. If you're using Printify, there are 2 options. One is to upload a background directly into Printify here in the preview viewer, and that is in the bottom right corner of the right side menu. So as we scroll down, you'll see a mockup background, and anything I have previously uploaded is showing here already. But you can also click on Add New Image to upload your own, and they recommend the dimensions of 2048 by 2048 pixels, so that would be the size you would create with any background you want to upload. This option may not be available for every product in the catalog, but for your major apparel products, I know it is here. I believe it's also here for mugs. So this is going to be an option for most products, and I think they're still expanding it. But for example, if we add the one that I have created to be the t-shirt background here, and now there we go. Now this is not the best background color to use for white t-shirts. So if you're selling your design on a white t-shirt, you may want to pick a darker background than this, obviously, to get better contrast. But you can very easily use any editing software like Canva or Kittl or Photoshop to create one of these background files. You can put your shop logo on it, and then you'll have a nice background, and you don't have to do anything outside of Printify if you use this option, which is nice because they'll publish right to your store just like this. So if this works for you, this is a nice option that I think it saves you quite a few clicks. And also for the mockups where it is a person, you can separately select, as you can see, the front mockup, the lay flat mockup here, that's the only one that it applied that background to. It doesn't apply them to all. So you can change the mockups individually. So if we look at this one of a person that I might want to use, I can add a different background to that. And I got a nice image of sort of a living room background scene that I've used for some of my individual person ones. All I did for those was come over to Canva, click on Create a Design in the top right, click on Custom Size there, and then enter your size that you want. Now remember, Printify recommended 2048 by 2048. So that's what I'm going to click there. And then all I did here was I went to the Photos option in the left menu, and then I put in a search for living room. And then you get all of these pictures to select from a living room scene. And all you have to do then is fill out your canvas. And then from there, I would just recommend adding a little bit of blur, because remember, this is going to be in the background and you want some separation. You don't want to look too strange. So if you click on Edit Photo here in the corner and then go down to the effects and then click on blur, you'll be able to use the little slider there to adjust how much blur you've got in the background. So you don't want it to be like so blurry you can't tell what it is, but just add a little bit of blur. I'm going to stick at about 25%. Now, if I downloaded this, I could upload this as a new background to use for these mockups here on Printify. So you can create several variations and then find, a couple that work the best for you, either for lay flat or for these person mockups, and then you can just have a nice pre-made set. Like I said, they stay here in your Printify account after you've uploaded them, so you don't have to worry about doing this every single time. And then you'll have nice consistent mockups with a background that publish straight to your shop from Printify. And to me, that's a pretty efficient process. Printful also has a custom mockup creation workflow where you can add backgrounds directly on the platform and then publish them with your listing. Now I'm going to use a product template here to show you this, but this is also something you can do in your product creation workflow or when you create a new product template. So if I click on download mockups here on an existing product template, these are the two options that you get. You get basic mockups and custom mockups. So if we click on create your own, this takes us to the mockup creation tool. And on Printful, they actually already have a bunch of backgrounds, even props and stuff preloaded. Now they also have scenes that are pre-created. So for example, over here in your left side of the menu, you have a whole bunch. These are all just pre-made backgrounds that you can add. So I'm going to click on one with a wood background and a couple of props here. So if I like this one, I can click on select and continue, and then it brings me to basically another editor view where I can move around these props, these plants. I can resize them. I can move them around. I can do pretty much anything I want with this as if I was editing it like on Canva or in the design editor view. I can also add my own uploads here. So if I wanted to add my shop logo or if I wanted to add text, all of those options are over here in the left side of the menu. You can also replace, props if there's a specific one you wanted to add to your mockups before you proceed. You can also rearrange layers. You can do a lot with this custom mockup creation tool, which can be dangerous. This is not something that you want to spend like an hour doing for one mockup for one product. But at the same time, it is nice to have all these options if Printful is your platform. From there, you just continue. And if you were in the creation workflow where you're making a listing, it would just push you to the next stage. But because I clicked on an existing product template, this was just basically making new mockups. And so it takes me to a screen to download what I created. So you can do this after you've created a product, or you can do it during the product creation workflow. However, it's not the only process. It's not the only option out there. There are definitely other ways to add backgrounds to your mockups. Let's take a look at two that take advantage of AI. One would be for Kittl users. If you use Kittl to create your designs or even your mockups, because they do have mockups now, you can use the AI background tool in Kittl, which you can find if you go to the AI tools menu in the top part of the screen here, and then go to the first option, AI product backgrounds. All you have to do is upload an image of your product and then put in a couple of prompts and you can get a background generated. So for example, if I upload an image of that shirt, it will automatically wipe the background from around the product if there already is one. So it takes a second. And there it goes. So now it's got a transparent background, and you can choose between these scene options or you can put in your own prompt. So the scene options are all pretty basic. So for this one, I'm going to go back to scene, and I'm just going to go to materials and click on wood and then click on generate background, and we'll see what we get. Now it'll bring us down below here. You can see I already tested this out on a mug, and I've got a couple of pretty usable results here with that mug that I tested it with. And there we go. And unfortunately, we have kind of a not so good result here. I selected wood here as the material up there, and it's somehow managed to deliver a mock-up with a fake cement brick background. Here's one of the downsides of using these AI tools. I'm actually glad that this happened because I did want to point out, I have found that some of these tools that are newer especially, they're not always super accurate, and the times I've tried to use them, sometimes you get a really nice usable result. Like for example, one of these mugs, this to me, perfectly usable result. This was a plain white background mockup that I downloaded from Printify of this mug. That whole background, it was AI generated on Kittl. However, this background is not even close to the prompt that I put in. And on the second time around, it did generate a wood surface, but it's not really a color that I'm in love with. I'd prefer something looking a little bit different. So this is why I personally don't yet use AI tools to generate all of my backgrounds. I test it here and there to see like how good it is if I have the time. But when I'm like really head down in a workflow of trying to crank out a few new listings, I personally don't use these AI tools, at least not yet. Now, I'm not saying don't use these yourself. I'm not saying I don't recommend them at all. I'm just saying, be conscious of the time you're spending. If you run into something like this, I would probably bail on it and go back to like the traditional way of creating your mockups, which would just be, go to Canva, search for an image, and then pick one you like. Personally, sometimes that's still faster. But to give AI the benefit of the doubt, let's try another tool. Now, this one you would have had to have paid for Photoshop to be able to get this. This is the Adobe Photoshop beta version, which actually has all the generative fill tool and the eraser that's AI based. So let's test this out and see how this does doing the exact same thing. So I have a blank file here that is 2048 by 2048, and I'm going to bring in that same mockup. All right, so I'm just going to resize that to fill out the entire canvas area. Now, instead of doing the thing that I always always used to do in Photoshop, which was to select the white area with one of the selection tools and then manually delete it. Right below that on the little hover menu, I actually have an option here that says remove background. So I'm just going to do that. So we'll click on that, and then literally that was less than a second it took to delete the background. So now what I need to do is I need to actually select the open area here in order to use the fill tool. So what I'm going to do is just hold down my command, which you would do hold down control on Windows, and then click on the image of the layer over to the right in the layer menu. That will select that layer. And then I'm going to get generative fill here. So I'm going to click on generative fill, and it's going to give me the little window for a prompt. And I'm going to say wooden surface, and I'm just going to click generate because I want to try and keep this as simple as possible. So we'll see how well this does with minimal information to work with. So there we go. It actually created a wooden surface, which looks pretty realistic, and it's on top of my design layer. So I'm now just going to grab my design layer here and drag it up. And then on your right menu, it actually even gives you variation. So I can select these 3 different options that it gave me based on that first prompt. So there we go. That's it. It was that fast and easy, just a couple of clicks. I may have even done it less efficiently than possible. There may be a way to save a couple of those clicks in there. This may not be a bad option. You could probably get a little bit more complex with your prompt. When these are more accurate, one of the reasons they can save you time is because instead of going and searching on Canva or on Pexels or Pixabay for a different background, like if maybe I just needed a different color wood or something for this file that I'm working with, I don't have to go search for that. I can just use generative fill and say I need a darker color wood, and it will just fill it in for you. I find this to be fairly accurate. So if you are a Photoshop user, if you already pay for Photoshop, this could be a pretty quick way to add some backgrounds to your mockups. And you don't have to do this every time because you can still save this PSD file as a template. If it generated a background you really like, you can still throw your shop logo on the layer and then just, add your new mockup for each design that you create and then export them that way. So you don't have to go through the generation process every single time. And that's really it for this video. I just wanted to talk about that feature for viewing your design in CMYK for your mockups. And then if you want to use that, going about creating your backgrounds for your mockups. There really isn't a wrong way to do it, like I mentioned. It's just a matter of figuring out what's most efficient for you. So I hope this was helpful for you. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about any of these things that we talked about in this video. And also, if you want to share any tips about your mockup creation workflow with everybody else, do that in the comments as well. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.